My name is Lauren, and I am 34 years old, standing in a family courtroom where my own parents are trying to legally destroy me. Their lawyer, Mr. Vance, is shouting that I am mentally unstable because I rescue stray cats. My mother, Diane, is dabbing fake tears with a handkerchief that costs more than my car, while my father, Richard, shakes his head in practiced sorrow. They claim I am too irresponsible to manage the $500 inheritance my aunt left me. They want control of my bank accounts, my car, and even my freedom. The judge bangs his gavel demanding order, but I just sit there silently gripping my pen. My parents think they have won. They think I am the same broke failure they have always looked down on. What they do not know is that the $500 they are fighting over is change compared to what I actually own. Before I tell you how I turned this courtroom into their worst nightmare, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to love you. 2 weeks ago, I was standing at the graveside of my great-aunt Josephine, the only person in my family who ever treated me with kindness. The October wind in Connecticut was biting, but the chill coming from my family was colder. I was wearing a simple black dress I had bought off the rack years ago, and my sister-in-law Keisha wasted no time in pointing it out. She leaned over, whispering loud enough for everyone to hear, asking if I had picked it up at Goodwill on the way over, because apparently funerals are fashion shows in her world. I ignored her, just as I ignored my brother Brandon when he cornered me by the hearse. He did not offer condolences. Instead, he pitched me his latest cryptocurrency scheme, demanding I invest $500 to show family support. When I told him I did not have the cash, he rolled his eyes and muttered that I was useless, just like always. But the real ambush happened after the service. My father, Richard, pulled me into the private viewing room of the funeral home away from the other guests. He locked the door and slid a document across the mahogany table. He told me that Aunt Josephine had left me $500 in her will. My heart jumped, not because of the money, but because she had thought of me. But before I could even process the gratitude, my father crushed it. He said they knew I would just waste the money on nonsense like my cats or rent for my dumpy apartment. He told me to sign a power of attorney granting him full control over the inheritance. He promised they would be generous and give me a $1,000 allowance every month if I behaved. I looked at the paper, then at my father's expectant face. I told him no. I told him the money was mine, and I would manage it myself. That was when my mother, Diane, lost her composure. She slapped me hard across the face, the sound echoing in the small room. She screamed that I was an ungrateful brat. She said she would rather see that money burn than watch me throw it away while her golden child Brandon struggled to get his business off the ground. My father stepped in, his voice low and threatening. He said if I did not sign voluntarily, he would use his legal connections to force me. He said he would prove I was mentally incapacitated and take conservatorship over me, just like they do to celebrities who lose their minds. He said he knew I was seeing a therapist for depression, and he would use those records to bury me. I walked out of that funeral home shaking with rage, but not with fear. I got into my 2015 Honda Civic and drove straight to a payphone outside a gas station because I knew they monitored my cell phone. I dialed a number I had memorized years ago. When the voice on the other end answered, I simply said they took the bait. It is time to initiate Protocol Phoenix. My lawyer, Silas Thorne, picked up immediately. He did not ask if I was sure. He just said he would have the paperwork ready by morning. My parents thought they were cornering a helpless kitten. They had no idea they were poking a sleeping dragon. That night, I received a text from my father. It was a picture of a filled-out court petition for emergency conservatorship. The caption read, "This is your last chance, Lauren. Sign the voluntary agreement, or we take everything." I did not reply. Instead, I sat in my small apartment surrounded by the 3 cats I had rescued and opened my laptop. I logged into my secure server, the one my family knew nothing about. I watched the numbers on the screen fluctuate as the Asian markets opened. My parents saw a woman who could barely afford rent. The market saw the CEO of Phoenix Holdings, a company that specialized in buying distressed debt and high-risk assets. I was not just surviving, I was thriving. And the irony was my company had just finalized the purchase of a very specific portfolio of bad loans. Loans that belonged to a disgraced former lawyer named Richard and a shopaholic housewife named Diane. I closed the laptop and smiled. If they wanted a war in court, I would give them one. But first, I had to let them think they were winning. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of a tow truck. I looked out the window to see my Honda being lifted off the street. My personal checking account, the one they knew about, was frozen. A process server was banging on my door with a court order. My father had made good on his threat. He had filed an emergency motion claiming I was a danger to myself and my finances. I opened the door and took the papers playing the part of the terrified daughter. I let the tears fall as the neighbors watched. I let the process server see a broken woman. But inside, I was counting down the minutes. The court date was set for 2 weeks from now. 2 weeks of hell. 2 weeks of them invading my life. But also 2 weeks for Silas to prepare the trap that would snap shut on their necks forever. They wanted to prove I was irresponsible. I was about to prove they were criminals. The sound of grinding metal shattered my sleep at 6 in the morning. It was a violent mechanical screech that vibrated through the thin floorboards of my apartment. I bolted from bed and ran to the window, pulling the blinds aside just in time to see my gray Honda Civic angling precariously into the air. It was being dragged onto the flatbed of a tow truck. My heart hammered against my ribs, not because I was scared, but because it was starting. Protocol Phoenix was live. I threw on a robe and ran down the stairs barefoot, the cold morning pavement biting into my skin. I did not scream or cry. I just stood there watching as the only visible asset I owned was chained down. A man in a cheap suit stepped out from behind the truck. He was holding a thick envelope. He was not a thief. He was a process server. He looked at me with the bored indifference of someone who ruined lives for a living and asked if I was Lauren. When I nodded, he shoved the envelope into my hands. "You have been served," he said. "Emergency ex parte order for temporary conservatorship. The petitioner is Richard." The tow truck driver did not even look at me as he engaged the hydraulics. He just lifted my car, my freedom, and drove away, leaving me standing on the curb in my bathrobe while my neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains. I walked back upstairs and picked up my phone. I tried to log into my personal checking account, the one at the local bank where my parents knew I banked. Access denied. Account frozen by court order. I tried my credit card. Declined. In the span of 30 minutes, my father had stripped me of my transportation and my liquidity. He wanted me paralyzed. He wanted me to feel the suffocating weight of total dependency. He wanted the scared little girl who used to beg for allowance to come back. But she was gone. The envelope contained a court order signed by a judge I recognized, Judge Abernathy. He was known for being tough but fair, which meant my father had likely lied through his teeth to get this signature. The petition claimed I was suffering from delusions of poverty while recklessly spending inheritance money on hoarding animals. It cited my lack of employment and my refusal to seek help. It painted a picture of a woman spiraling into madness. At the bottom of the order was a mandate. I was to report immediately to the office of Dr. Aris for a competency evaluation. Failure to comply would result in an arrest warrant. I did not call Silas yet. We had agreed that for this to work, I had to let them think their plan was flawless. I had to walk into the trap willingly. I showered and dressed in the same simple clothes I wore every day, jeans and a black turtleneck. I did not put on makeup. I wanted to look tired. I wanted to look like the victim they described. I called a taxi using the emergency cash I kept hidden in a hollowed-out book on my shelf. Dr. Aris had an office in the most expensive medical building in downtown. The waiting room smelled of lavender and old money. I knew all about Dr. Aris. My due diligence team at Phoenix Holdings had run a background check on him months ago when I first suspected my parents might try something like this. He was the go-to psychiatrist for wealthy Connecticut families who needed to silence a black sheep. He specialized in diagnosing inconvenient relatives with conditions that required long, expensive stays in private facilities. He was not a doctor. He was a hired gun with a prescription pad. I sat in the waiting room for 40 minutes past my appointment time. It was a power move. He wanted me anxious. He wanted me sweating. When the nurse finally called my name, she did not smile. She led me into an office that was too large and too cold. Dr. Aris sat behind a desk that looked like it cost more than my apartment. He did not stand up. He just gestured to a leather chair that was positioned slightly lower than his own. He started with the basics. He asked me my name and the date. He asked me who the president was. He was establishing a baseline, treating me like a dementia patient. I answered calmly. My voice was steady. I watched his pen move across his notepad. He was already writing his conclusion before I had even spoken a full sentence. Then the real interrogation began. He asked me about the cats. He said, "Your parents are very concerned, Lauren. They say you have filled your apartment with stray animals. They say you are spending thousands of dollars on them while you cannot afford to fix your own car. Is that true?" I looked him in the eye. "I do not hoard animals, Dr. Aris. I foster them for the city shelter until they can be adopted. The money I spend is a charitable donation which is tax deductible. It is not reckless spending. It is philanthropy." He paused. He did not like that word coming from my mouth. Philanthropy was a word for rich people, not for the woman in the scuffed boots sitting across from him. He adjusted his glasses. "Let us talk about your employment. Your father states you have been unemployed for 3 years. He says you refuse to get a job. How do you explain your survival without a steady income?" I leaned back in the chair. "I am not unemployed. I am self-employed. I manage a private portfolio." He chuckled, a dry, condescending sound. "A private portfolio? You mean the $500,000 your aunt left you? The money you are refusing to let your father protect? Lauren, that is not a job. That is a windfall. And from what I hear, you are burning through it. Do you understand the concept of long-term financial planning?" I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling. He was walking right into it. "I understand compound interest, Dr. Aris. I understand asset allocation and risk management. I understand that my father has a gambling debt of $200,000 and a second mortgage he has not disclosed to the bank." The doctor stopped writing. His head snapped up. "What did you say?" I kept my face blank. I said, "I understand finance. My father is projecting his own insecurity onto me. He is the one who needs a conservator." Dr. Aris put his pen down. He leaned over the desk, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You are exhibiting signs of paranoia, Lauren. Grandiose delusions. Accusing a respected attorney like your father of financial ruin is a classic symptom of dissociation. You are creating a fantasy world where you are the competent one and everyone else is failing. This is exactly what your parents warned me about." He was twisting it, just like I knew he would. He was taking my truth and turning it into a diagnosis. He opened a drawer and pulled out a form. "I am going to recommend an involuntary hold. 72 hours at the Whispering Pines facility. It is for your own safety. We need to stabilize you before you do something you regret." Whispering Pines. I knew that place too. It was a holding tank for the unwanted. If I went in there, I might not come out for months. My father would use that time to drain the inheritance. This was the moment. I had to pivot. I stood up. I did not raise my voice. I did not scream. I just looked at the camera in the corner of the room. "Is that recording, Dr. Aris?" He blinked. "Of course. For liability purposes." "Good," I said. "Then it recorded you ignoring my statement about my father's debts. It recorded you dismissing my explanation of my charitable work. And I assume it recorded the fact that you received a wire transfer of $10,000 from my mother's personal account yesterday afternoon." The color drained from his face. He stood up so fast his chair hit the wall behind him. "How do you know that?" I fixed him with a look that I usually reserved for hostile board meetings. Because I pay attention, Dr. Aris. You are about to sign a sworn affidavit to the court, stating I am incompetent. If you do that knowing you took a bribe, you are committing perjury. And since you are a medical professional, you are also committing malpractice. He was shaking. The arrogant doctor was gone. In his place was a man who realized he had just stepped on a landmine. You hacked my accounts, he stammered. I did no such thing, I said, smoothing down my shirt. I simply hired a very good forensic accountant. Public records are fascinating if you know where to look. Now you can write whatever report you want. But just know that my lawyer will be subpoenaing your bank records in discovery. I walked to the door. He did not try to stop me. He was too busy staring at his computer screen, probably trying to figure out how much I knew. I walked out of the building and into the bright sunlight. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. It was adrenaline. I had survived the first wave. I pulled out my burner phone and dialed Silas. The evaluation is done, I said. He is going to file the report claiming I am crazy. He has to. He took the money. Silas laughed on the other end of the line. Good. Let him file it. The more lies they put on paper, the harder they fall. Are you safe? I looked down the street. A black sedan was parked 2 blocks away. My father had put a tail on me. I am safe, I said. But they are watching me. Let them watch, Silas said. Go back to the apartment. Let them see you living in squalor. Let them think they have won. The court date is in 10 days. We will be ready. I walked home because I had no car and no access to my money. It was a 5-mile walk. Every step fueled my resolve. I thought about Keisha laughing at my clothes. I thought about Brandon trying to scam me. I thought about my mother slapping me. They thought they were taking away my dignity by forcing me to walk. They were wrong. They were just giving me time to rehearse their destruction. When I finally reached my apartment building, I saw my sister-in-law Keisha sitting in her car across the street. She was watching my building. She held up her phone and took a picture of me walking up the steps, sweaty and exhausted. She smiled. It was a predatory smile. She thought she was looking at a defeated woman. She had no idea she was looking at the person who had just bought the mortgage on her house. The lock on my front door clicked open with a sound that felt like a gunshot in the quiet afternoon. I was sitting on my sofa nursing a cup of tea, still shaking from the encounter with Dr. Aris, when the door swung wide. I did not move. I did not scream. I just watched as my personal sanctuary was breached by the 4 people I despised most in the world. My father Richard led the way, holding a spare key I had given him 5 years ago for emergencies only. Apparently, a financial audit constituted an emergency. He walked in with the entitlement of a landlord entering a delinquent property, followed closely by my mother Diane, my brother Brandon, and his wife Keisha. They did not knock. They did not announce themselves. They just swarmed in. My mother wrinkled her nose immediately, as if the air in my apartment was contaminated. She was wearing a Chanel tweed suit that looked ridiculous in my minimalist living room. She scanned the space, her eyes darting from my low-profile sofa to the simple oak coffee table. "It smells like cat in here," she announced, her voice cutting through the silence. "It smells like poverty." I set my tea down carefully. "What are you doing here?" Richard did not even look at me. He was busy examining the crown molding. "We are conducting an inventory, Lauren. Since you have proven incapable of managing your affairs, the court will require a full accounting of your assets. We need to see if there is anything of value here to liquidate against your debts." Debts. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I had 0 debt. My father was leveraged to his eyeballs, but I stayed seated. I let my shoulders slump. I let them see the defeat they were so desperate to find. "You cannot just walk in here," I said, my voice trembling just enough to be convincing. "This is my home." "It is a rental," Brandon sneered, walking past me into the kitchen. He opened my refrigerator and grabbed a bottle of sparkling water, cracking it open without asking. And since Dad is paying for everything now, technically, it is his home. You are just squatting. My mother began opening drawers. She pulled out my silverware, holding up a fork with disdain. Stainless steel, she muttered, tossing it back with a clatter. Not even silver plate. Silver. Richard, honestly, I do not know where she gets this lack of taste. We raised her better than this. They moved through the apartment like a plague of locusts. I watched them touch my things with their greedy, judgmental hands. They were looking for money. They were looking for secrets, but mostly they were looking for validation. They wanted to confirm that I was the failure they needed me to be. If I was failing, it meant they were succeeding. It was a sick, twisted ecosystem, and I was the bottom feeder. Keisha wandered into the bedroom. I felt a spike of adrenaline. The bedroom was where I kept the few things I actually cared about. My laptop was locked in the safe, but my closet was vulnerable. I followed them, standing in the doorway as Keisha flung open my closet doors. She laughed. It was a harsh barking sound. Look at this, Brandon. It is like a monk lives here. Where are the colors? Where are the labels? My wardrobe was capsule style. High-quality fabrics, neutral colors, no logos. To Keisha, who believed fashion meant wearing the brand name across your chest in sequins, it looked like a collection of rags. She started pulling hangers off the rack, throwing my cashmere sweaters onto the floor. This is trash. This is moth-eaten. Why do you even keep this? I bit my tongue. That sweater she just threw on the floor was Loro Piana. It cost more than her wedding dress, but I could not say that. I had to be the broke daughter. I had to be the charity case. Please stop, I said, stepping forward. Please do not throw my clothes. My mother turned on me. Do not tell us what to do, Lauren. We are trying to help you. We need to clear out this junk so we can see if the apartment is even livable. Keisha was digging in the back of the closet now. She was kicking aside shoeboxes, looking for anything that might be worth pawning. Her hand landed on a dust bag in the far corner. My heart stopped. I had forgotten to move it. She pulled out the bag and dumped its contents onto the bed. It was a leather tote bag. The leather was distressed, a rich cognac color that looked weathered and beaten. It was slouchy and unstructured. To the untrained eye, it looked like something you would find at a garage sale for $5. Keisha picked it up by one strap, dangling it like a dead rat. Ew, what is this? It is stained. It looks like it has been run over by a truck. She made a move to toss it into the garbage bag Brandon was holding open. Don't touch that. The command ripped out of my throat before I could stop it. I lunged forward, grabbing the bag from her hand. It was instinct. That bag was not trash. It was a vintage Hermès Haute Courroie from the 1940s. It was a museum piece. I had bought it at an auction in Paris after closing my first $10 million deal. It was my trophy. It was worth $50,000. Keisha recoiled, looking at me like I was insane. She laughed again, mocking my desperation. Wow, touchy. It is a piece of garbage, Lauren. Look at it. It is scratching and peeling. You are literally hoarding trash. This is exactly what Dr. Aris was talking about. You are attached to garbage. I clutched the bag to my chest, my knuckles white. It is sentimental, I lied, my voice shaking. Just leave it alone. My father walked into the room. He saw me clutching the bag, saw the defiance in my eyes. He stepped into my personal space, looming over me. He used his height to intimidate, just like he did when I was a child. Give me the bag, Lauren. No. He grabbed the strap. I held on. For a second, we were locked in a tug-of-war over $50,000 of leather. He yanked hard. I stumbled, but I did not let go. Let go, he snarled. You are acting like a child. We are throwing this out. It is a health hazard. I looked him dead in the eye. If you tear this bag, I will scream. I will scream so loud the neighbors will call the cops. Do you want the police here, Richard? Do you want them to see you wrestling your daughter for a purse? He let go. He smoothed his suit jacket, sneering at me with pure disgust. You are pathetic. You are fighting over a piece of flea market junk while your life falls apart. Fine. Keep your trash. It suits you. He turned to the rest of the family, clapping his hands together like a general commanding troops. All right, that is enough. We have seen what we needed to see. There is nothing of value here. Just junk and cat hair. My mother sniffed, wiping her hands on a sanitizing wipe she had pulled from her purse. It is a disgrace, Richard. I cannot believe we let her live like this for so long. It reflects poorly on us. It ends today, my father said. He turned back to me, his face cold and hard. Listen to me clearly, Lauren. This ends now. We are terminating your lease. I blinked. What? You heard me. I spoke to the landlord this morning. As your temporary conservator, I have the authority to make housing decisions for you. I told him you are vacating the premises. But I paid rent, I stammered. I paid through the end of the year. My father waved his hand dismissively. We will be seeking a refund of that money to pay for your treatment. But that is not the point. The point is you cannot live here alone anymore. You are a danger to yourself. Brandon stepped forward, a smug grin plastered across his face. He looked around the room, seeing possibilities where my parents saw filth. Actually, Dad, this place has good bones. Great natural light. It would make a killer office for my crypto startup. You know, once we get the smell out. My father nodded. That is the plan. Brandon needs a headquarters. He is actually doing something with his life. He needs space to grow. You, on the other hand, need supervision. He pointed a finger at my face. Pack a bag. Essentials only. No cats, no trash. From tomorrow, you are moving into the basement at our house. The basement. The unfinished, damp, windowless basement where they stored holiday decorations and my father's old law books. They wanted to put me in a dungeon. They wanted to erase me. You are going to help your mother with the housekeeping, my father continued. It will be good for you. Routine. Humility. You will earn your keep until you are well enough to work a real job. Maybe we can get you a shift at the grocery store bagging items. Something simple that you cannot mess up. Keisha giggled. Can you imagine Lauren bagging groceries? She would probably try to adopt the rotisserie chickens. They all laughed. It was a cruel, unified sound. They were enjoying this. They were feasting on my degradation. I looked at them one by one. My mother, who cared more about appearances than her daughter. My brother, who saw me as a resource to be cannibalized. My sister-in-law, who mocked what she could not understand. And my father, who wanted to break my spirit to hide his own failures. I lowered my head, hiding the spark in my eyes. I let my shoulders drop. I let a single tear slide down my cheek. Okay, I whispered. What was that? My father barked. Speak up. I said okay, I repeated louder. You are right. I cannot do this anymore. I will pack. My mother sighed, relieved. Finally. A moment of clarity. We will be back tomorrow at noon with the van. Be ready. And get rid of those cats, Lauren. I mean it. If I see one cat hair on your clothes, you are sleeping in the garage. They turned and marched out, leaving the door wide open behind them. They walked down the hallway, talking loudly about paint colors for Brandon's new office. They were already redesigning my life. They were already spending my money. I walked to the door and closed it softly. I locked the deadbolt. Then I slid the chain into place. I leaned my back against the wood and slid down until I hit the floor. I did not cry. I started to laugh. It was a low, dark sound. They wanted the apartment. They wanted to put me in the basement. They wanted to take my car, my dignity, and my freedom. I looked at the Hermes bag on the bed. I crawled over to it and smoothed the leather where my father had grabbed it. It was undamaged, durable, just like me. I pulled my burner phone from its hiding spot under the mattress. I dialed Silas. They just left, I said. They broke in. They searched the place. And Richard just verbally confirmed he is evicting me to give the apartment to Brandon. Did you get it? Silas asked. I looked at the tiny camera lens hidden in the smoke detector above the bed. I looked at the one on the bookshelf in the living room. I got everything I said, every word, every threat, and the attempted theft of a $50,000 asset. Perfect, Silas said. That is the final nail. Trespassing, harassment, breach of fiduciary duty, and we have it all on video. By the way, did they find the safe? No, I said. They were too busy looking at my sweaters. Good. Get the files ready, Lauren. The hearing is in 48 hours. They think they are moving you into a basement. We are about to move them into a federal penitentiary. I hung up the phone. I looked around my apartment one last time. It was not much to look at, but it was mine. And tomorrow when they came back with their van, they were going to find it empty. Not because I was moving to their basement, but because I was moving to the penthouse of the building I had bought 3 days ago, the building their house was leveraged against. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. I picked up the bottle of sparkling water Brandon had opened and took a sip. It tasted like victory. They wanted a war. They just walked onto a nuclear testing site. I waited exactly 5 minutes after their SUV peeled out of the parking lot. I stood by the window and watched the dust settle on the street where my car used to be. The silence in the apartment was heavy, but it was not the silence of defeat. It was the silence of a predator waiting in the tall grass. They thought they had left a broken woman weeping among her moth-eaten sweaters. They thought I was currently packing a duffel bag to move into their moldy basement to scrub their floors and earn my keep. The arrogance of it was almost impressive. I walked to the kitchen and reached for the box of cat food on the top shelf. I poured the kibble into a bowl, but I did not put the box back. Instead, I reached deep inside it past the cardboard liner to the false bottom I had installed 3 years ago. My fingers brushed against cold metal. I pulled out a satellite phone and a small encrypted hard drive. This was the nerve center of Phoenix Holdings. This was the machine that generated millions while my family fought over pennies. I booted up my laptop and connected the drive. The screen flickered to life, bypassing the standard operating system and loading my secure interface. I was no longer Lauren the unemployed spinster. I was the chairman. The interface showed me the real-time status of my acquisitions. I had alerts pending. One of them was blinking red. It was the file I had named Project Hubris. I dialed a number on the satellite phone. It rang once. "Go for Phoenix," a voice answered. It was my head of acquisitions, a man who thought I was operating out of a penthouse in Singapore, not a studio apartment in Connecticut. "Status report." I said, my voice dropping an octave, shedding the tremble I used for my father. "We have the package secured," the broker said. "The bank is eager to offload the toxic assets. They have no idea who the buyer is, just that the check cleared. We are looking at a bundle of 3 distressed mortgages. 1 commercial property in downtown that is underwater, 1 vacation timeshare in Florida that is 6 months behind, and 1 primary residence in the suburbs, a colonial-style home, 4 bedrooms, heated pool. The owners are significantly in arrears. They have missed the last 4 payments and have a second lien against the property from a gambling creditor." I looked at the screen. I pulled up the deed to my parents' house. The house where I grew up. The house where they locked me in my room for being too loud. The house where they were currently planning to imprison me in the basement. "Execute the buy order," I said. "I want the title transferred to the Shell Corporation by close of business today. Do not send the foreclosure notice yet. I want to hold the note. I want to be the bank." "Understood," the broker said. "You want to squeeze them." "I do not just want to squeeze them," I said coldly. "I want to own the ground they walk on. I want every light switch they flip and every drop of water they use to belong to me. Buy it all. And buy the debt from the gambling creditor too. Pay him 50 cents on the dollar. He will take it. Done. Anything else?" "Yes. Run a credit check on my brother Brandon. See if there is any recent activity. Hold on." I waited, listening to the hum of the servers on the other end. "Here it is," the broker said. "He just pinged the system 20 minutes ago. A hard credit pull. It looks like it is coming from a luxury marine dealership. Prestige yachts." I almost laughed. Of course. They were not just counting their chickens before they hatched. They were spending the money before they even stole it. "Keep monitoring," I said. "Let me know if he signs anything." I hung up and switched tabs on my laptop. I pulled up the live security feed from the marina dealership. I knew exactly which one it was. Brandon had been obsessing over a specific boat for months, posting pictures of it on his vision board. I hacked into their showroom camera. It was not hard. Their password was literally password. There they were, Brandon and Keisha. They were sitting in the plush office of a yacht salesman. Keisha was wearing sunglasses indoors, looking at a brochure like she was royalty. Brandon was leaning back in his chair, one leg crossed over the other, looking like he owned the place. He was pointing at a glossy photo of a 40-foot cruiser. I turned up the volume on the feed. "So the financing is secure?" the salesman was asking, looking skeptical. He saw a man in a wrinkled suit and a woman with fake designer bags. He smelled a waste of time. Brandon waved his hand dismissively. "Oh, absolutely. It is a family trust situation. We are coming into a significant liquidity event in about 10 days. My sister is having some health issues, and I will be taking over the management of the estate. We are just waiting for the judge to rubber stamp the paperwork." Keisha chimed in, her voice shrill and excited. "We want the platinum interior package and the custom sound system. We need it ready for the summer. We are going to host so many parties. It is going to be our treat to ourselves for dealing with all this family stress." The salesman perked up at the mention of a trust. He did not know the money they were spending was imaginary. He just heard liquidity event. "Well, if you want to lock in this price and the delivery date, I would need a deposit today," the salesman said. "Just to show good faith. $5,000. Fully refundable, of course, if the financing falls through." Brandon did not hesitate. He pulled out a credit card. It was not his card. I zoomed in on the video feed. It was my father's card. The one he claimed was maxed out. The one he said he could not use to help me fix my car. "Put it on this," Brandon said. "My father is backing the purchase. It is a gift." I watched the transaction go through. I watched them shake hands. I watched Keisha squeal and kiss Brandon's cheek. They were celebrating. They were toasting to my destruction. They were spending the money they planned to loot from my accounts, the money they thought was just sitting there waiting for them. They had no idea that the credit card they just used was attached to the house I now owned. They were digging a hole so deep they would never see the sun again. I closed the window. I did not need to see any more. They were predictable, greedy, stupid. They were the perfect marks. I went back to my financial interface. The transfer was complete. The notification popped up on my screen in green letters. "Transaction successful. Deed recorded." I sat back in my chair. I was now the legal owner of my parents' home. I owned the roof over their heads. I owned the bed they slept in. I owned the basement they wanted to lock me in. Technically, I could evict them tomorrow. I could have the sheriff throw their furniture on the lawn. But that was too easy. That was too quick. I wanted them to stand in court. I wanted them to lie under oath. I wanted them to tell the judge that I was incompetent. And then I wanted to reveal that I was the one holding the leash. I picked up the satellite phone again and called my assistant. "It is done," I said. "Now I need you to do one more thing. I need you to hire a cleaning crew." "A cleaning crew?" the assistant asked, confused. "For where?" "For the penthouse at the Obsidian Tower," I said. "I am moving in tonight, but do it quietly. I want the Honda left on the street. I want the apartment to look lived in, but I will not be sleeping here." "Understood." I hung up and started packing. Not the bag my father told me to pack. I packed my hard drives. I packed my documents. I packed the Hermes bag inside a nondescript duffel. I left the rest. The old clothes, the cheap furniture, the decoy life. I left it all there as a stage set for their little play. As I walked out of the apartment, I stopped by the thermostat. I turned it off. If they wanted to inspect the place again, they could do it in the cold. I slipped out the back exit into the alleyway where a black town car was waiting. It was not a tow truck. It was my driver. He opened the door for me. "To the tower, miss?" he asked. "Yes," I said, sliding into the leather seat. "And take the long way." I want to drive past the marina. We drove past prestige yachts. I saw Brandon and Keisha walking out to their car. They were laughing. Brandon was high-fiving the air. They looked so happy, so victorious. They thought they had won the lottery. I rolled down the tinted window just a crack and watched them. "Enjoy the boat ride, Brandon," I whispered, "because it is going to be a long swim back." My phone buzzed. It was a text from my father. "Make sure you pack cleaning supplies. The basement is dusty. And do not be late tomorrow. We have a schedule to keep." I looked at the message and felt a cold smile spread across my face. I would not be late. I would be right on time. And I would bring something much more effective than cleaning supplies. I would bring the foreclosure notice. But not yet. Not until they were under oath. I typed back a simple reply. "Okay, Dad. See you tomorrow." I hit send and let the phone drop into my bag. The car merged onto the highway heading toward the city skyline where my real life was waiting. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and blood orange. It was beautiful. It looked like the end of the world. And for my family, it was. The courtroom smelled of lemon polish and stale anxiety. It was a suffocating, windowless box where families came to tear each other apart, and today it was my turn on the chopping block. I sat at the defendant's table, my hands folded on the polished wood, feeling the weight of Judge Abernathy's gaze. He was an older man with bushy eyebrows and a reputation for having zero patience for nonsense. Right now, however, his patience seemed entirely directed at me. My parents sat on the plaintiff's side, looking like a portrait of grieving nobility. My mother wore black as if mourning the living daughter she was trying to bury. My father wore his best suit, the one he usually saved for the high-stakes cases he used to win before he lost his license. Mr. Vance, their lawyer, stood up. He was a theatrical man with a voice that carried to the back of the room without a microphone. He adjusted his cufflinks and walked toward the center of the floor, holding a sheaf of papers like a weapon. "Your Honor," he began, his voice dripping with false concern. "We are not here out of malice. We are here out of necessity. Richard and Diane love their daughter. They have supported her through years of instability, unemployment, and what can only be described as a complete detachment from reality. But there comes a point where love requires intervention." He turned to look at me. His eyes were cold. "Lauren has inherited a significant sum from her late aunt, $500,000. To a responsible adult, this would be a life-changing nest egg. To Lauren, it is fuel for a fire that is already burning out control. We have evidence, Your Honor, that she is already squandering her limited resources on bizarre and irrational obsessions." Vance walked to the clerk's desk and slapped the papers down. "Exhibit A, Your Honor. These are bank statements from the respondent's personal checking account over the last 12 months. They show a disturbing pattern of spending, specifically withdrawals totaling over $20,000 labeled simply as feral care." The judge picked up the papers, putting on his reading glasses. He frowned. $20,000. "Yes, Your Honor," Vance said. "While she lives in a rental apartment she cannot afford, while she drives a car that is falling apart, Lauren has funneled tens of thousands of dollars into feeding and medicating stray cats. She prioritizes animals over her own basic needs. This is not charity, Your Honor. This is a pathology. It is a compulsion. She believes she is saving the world one cat at a time while she herself is drowning." My mother let out a small, perfectly timed sob. She pressed a tissue to her eyes, shaking her head as if the shame was too much to bear. Keisha, sitting in the gallery behind them, patted her shoulder sympathetically. I could see the glint of the new diamond bracelet on Keisha's wrist, the one she had bought with my father's credit card. The irony was nauseating. The $20,000 Vance was waving around was a donation I had made to the city's animal control department to fund a spay and neuter program. It was a tax write-off for Phoenix Holdings routed through my personal account for simplicity. It was pocket change, but to them it was proof of madness. Vance continued building his narrative brick by brick. He talked about my lack of a career, my refusal to marry, my isolation. He painted a picture of a sad, lonely woman who filled the void in her life with animals because humans were too complex for her to handle. It was a compelling story. If I did not know who I was, I might have believed it myself. I called Dr. Aris to the stand, Vance announced. The doors opened and Dr. Aris walked in. He looked nervous, but he hid it well under a veneer of professional arrogance. He took the oath, his hand resting on the Bible, his eyes avoiding mine. He sat down and adjusted the microphone. Dr. Aris, Vance said, "You conducted a competency evaluation of the respondent 2 weeks ago. Can you share your findings with the court?" Dr. Aris cleared his throat. He opened his folder pretending to consult notes I knew he had written before I even walked into his office. The respondent exhibits classic symptoms of delusional disorder with grandiose tendencies, he stated, his voice clinical and detached. During our session, she made wild claims about her financial status. She referred to herself as self-employed and claimed to manage a private portfolio despite having no verifiable income for 3 years. She also exhibited paranoia, accusing her father, a respected member of the legal community, of having significant gambling debts. Judge Abernathy looked at me, his brow furrowed. He was listening. He was buying it. Dr. Aris continued. She rationalizes her reckless spending as philanthropy. She lacks insight into her own condition. When I suggested she needed help, she became defensive and hostile. In my professional opinion, she lacks the capacity to manage a sum as large as $500,000. She is likely to dissipate the assets within months, if not weeks, leaving her destitute and a burden on the state. Vance nodded gravely. Thank you, doctor. And would you say that a conservatorship is the least restrictive means to protect her? Absolutely, Aris said. She needs structure. She needs supervision. Her parents are the only thing standing between her and total ruin. I watched Dr. Aris step down. He walked past my table, and for a split second our eyes met. I saw the fear there. He knew he had just committed perjury. He knew I knew about the bribe. But he was banking on the fact that a judge would believe a doctor over a woman who lived in a basement. He was wrong. Silas, my lawyer, sat next to me, calm as a statue. He had not objected once. He was letting them talk. He was letting them put everything on the record. He wrote something on his legal pad and slid it over to me. It read, "Wait for the drop." I took a deep breath and waited. Vance called his final witness. I call Richard to the stand. My father stood up. He buttoned his jacket and walked to the witness box with the slow, heavy gait of a man carrying the weight of the world. He looked tired. He looked old. It was a good look for a martyr. Mr. Vance approached him gently. Richard, this must be very difficult for you. My father sighed. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a sadness that looked so real it made my stomach turn. It is heartbreaking, he said. You raise a child, you give them everything, you try to teach them right from wrong, and then you watch them lose their way. Lauren was such a bright girl. She had so much potential. But somewhere along the way, she just stopped trying. Can you tell the court about your relationship with your daughter? Vance asked. We have always tried to be there for her, my father said, even when she pushed us away. We paid her rent when she could not make it. We bought her groceries. We never asked for anything in return, except that she tried to get better. But she refuses to work. She refuses to live in the real world. When her aunt died and left her this money, we were terrified. We knew it would be like handing a loaded gun to a child. He paused, wiping a tear from his cheek. I do not want to control her life, Your Honor. I want to save it. I offered to let her move back home. I offered her a room in our house so we could help her get back on her feet. I offered to manage the money for her to invest it so she would have a future. And she spat in my face. She accused me of trying to steal from her. Me, her own father. The courtroom was silent. You could hear a pin drop. My father was good. He was really good. He was channeling every ounce of his failed career into this performance. He was the loving patriarch forced to make the hard choice. Vance lowered his voice. Richard, is it true that you believe your daughter is a danger to herself financially? Yes, my father whispered. If she gets this money, she will lose it all. She will be preyed upon by scammers. She will spend it on these delusions of saving the world. And when it is gone, she will have nothing. I cannot let that happen. I promised her mother I would protect her. Thank you, Richard, Vance said softly. No further questions. My father stayed in the witness box, wiping his eyes. He looked at the judge, a silent plea for understanding. Judge Abernathy took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He looked exhausted. He looked at me and I saw pity in his eyes. That was the worst part. He felt sorry for me. He saw a broken woman and a father trying to pick up the pieces. The judge cleared his throat. Ms. Lauren, he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. I have heard the testimony. I have seen the evidence. The bank statements are concerning. The doctor's evaluation is thorough. And your father's testimony is very compelling. The court has a duty to protect individuals who cannot protect themselves. He picked up his pen, ready to sign the order, ready to hand my life over to the man who had stolen my childhood, ready to give the keys to my kingdom to a gambling addict. I looked at Silas. He was smiling. It was a small, predatory smile. He stood up slowly, buttoning his expensive Italian suit. Your Honor, Silas said, his voice cutting through the emotional fog like a razor. Before you rule, the defense would like to present its case. We have been very patient while the plaintiff presented their version of reality, but I believe the court deserves to see the full picture. The judge hesitated. He looked annoyed. Mr. Thorne, the evidence seems quite clear. Unless you have something that directly contradicts the medical evaluation or the financial records, I am inclined to grant the temporary conservatorship. Oh, we have something, Silas said, picking up a heavy banker's box from the floor. We have quite a bit more than something. We have the truth. And unlike the fairy tale you just heard, the truth has receipts. He walked to the center of the room. He did not look at my parents. He looked at the judge. You heard that my client is unemployed, Silas said. You heard she has no assets. You heard she spends her money on stray cats. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. What if I told you, Silas said, that the $20,000 spent on cats was less than 0.1% of my client's annual charitable giving? What if I told you that the reason she has no employment history is because she does not work for anyone? She owns the company. My father scoffed loud enough for the court to hear. Objections. Your Honor. Vance stood up. This is ridiculous. We know her financial status. We inventoried her apartment. She has nothing. Silas ignored him. He pulled a single document from the box. It was a thick bound report with a gold seal on the front. Your Honor. I present to the court Defense Exhibit A. This is the audited financial statement of Phoenix Holdings LLC for the last fiscal year. It details the company's assets, liabilities, and ownership structure. He handed the document to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. Judge Abernathy opened it. He flipped the first page, then the second. His eyes stopped moving. He froze. Silas continued, his voice rising. As you can see on page 4, the sole proprietor and CEO of Phoenix Holdings is one Lauren Vance. And if you turn to page 10, you will see the personal tax returns filed by my client last year. The judge looked up. He looked at me. He looked at the paper again. Mr. Richard Abernathy said, his voice shaking slightly, you stated under oath that your daughter has no income. You stated she is destitute. My father stood up, looking confused. She is, Your Honor. She lives in a dump. She drives a 10-year-old Honda. This is a mistake. It is a forgery. She probably printed that off the internet. Silas laughed. It was a cold, hard sound. A forgery. That is interesting coming from you, Richard, because the document the judge is holding is certified by the IRS. It shows that last year my client paid $4.2 million in federal income taxes. The silence in the courtroom shattered. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. My mother stood up, her hand over her mouth. Keisha dropped her phone. Brandon looked like he had been hit by a truck. $4.2 million, the judge repeated. In taxes. Yes, Your Honor, Silas said, which would imply a gross income significantly higher than that. My client is not destitute, she is a whale. She is one of the most successful distressed asset investors on the East Coast. She lives modestly because she chooses to, not because she has to. My father was turning a shade of purple I had never seen before. That is impossible, he shouted. She is useless. She has been lying to us. She has been hiding money. She has been protecting herself, Silas corrected. From people like you. People who would drag her into court and call her crazy just to get their hands on a measly $500,000. Vance, the opposing lawyer, looked at the document over the judge's shoulder. His face went slack. He realized he had been fighting a nuclear war with a water gun. But that is not all, Silas said. He reached into the box again. We have addressed the income. Now let us address the debts. Richard, you claimed my client is a financial risk. You claimed you wanted to save her from ruin. Silas pulled out a stack of papers bound with a red rubber band. He held them up. This, Your Honor, is a purchase agreement executed 3 days ago. It details the acquisition of a portfolio of distressed mortgages by Phoenix Holdings. He walked over to my father's table and dropped the stack in front of him. It landed with a heavy thud. My father looked down. He saw the address on the top page. It was his address. My client, Silas said, pointing at me, does not just have money. She owns your debt. She owns your house, Richard. She owns the commercial building where you pretend to have an office. She owns the vacation condo in Florida that is 6 months behind on payments. She bought it all. My mother screamed. It was a shrill, piercing sound. You bought our house! I stood up then. I looked her in the eye. I did not buy it, Mom. I repossessed it. You have not paid your mortgage in 4 months. You are insolvent. The judge was banging his gavel, but nobody was listening. The courtroom had turned into a circus. My father was flipping through the mortgage papers, his hands shaking so hard, he tore one of the pages. This is illegal, he sputtered. You cannot do this. This is entrapment. It is business, Silas said coldly. And business is good. The judge finally slammed his gavel down hard enough to crack the wood. Order, he roared. Order in this court, or I will clear the room. The noise died down. Heavy breathing filled the space. My parents looked like cornered animals. Mr. Thorne, the judge, said, his voice tight with controlled anger. Are you telling me that the respondent, the woman these parents claim is incompetent, is actually their landlord and their creditor? That is exactly what I am saying, Your Honor, Silas replied. And as her creditor, she is intimately familiar with their finances. Which brings us to the final piece of evidence. The reason why they are really here. Silas looked at me. It was time. The final blow. He reached into the box one last time. He pulled out a single sheet of paper sealed in a plastic evidence bag. Your Honor, Silas said, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. We have discussed the money. We have discussed the lies, but we have not discussed the crime. He walked to the bench and placed the plastic bag in front of the judge. This is the original will of Aunt Josephine, retrieved from her safety deposit box this morning by a court-appointed executor. It was not easy to find. It was hidden behind a false panel. But my client knew where to look because her aunt told her before she died. The judge picked up the bag. He looked at the document inside. Richard claimed the inheritance was $500,000, Silas said. He claimed he needed to manage it, but if you look at the official will, the one that has not been tampered with, you will see a different number. The judge's eyes widened. He looked at the paper. Then he looked at my father. The look on his face was terrifying. It was the look of a man who realized he had been played for a fool in his own courtroom. $5 million, the judge read. The bequest is $5 million, not 500,000. And if you look at the signature on the petition Richard filed, Silas added, you will see it matches the signature on the fake will he tried to get my client to sign. He forged the document. Your Honor, he tried to steal $4.5 million from his own daughter and then have her committed to cover his tracks. My father collapsed into his chair. My mother was sobbing real ugly tears now. Keisha and Brandon were backing away toward the door, trying to distance themselves from the blast radius. The judge stood up, his face was red. He pointed a finger at my father, a finger that shook with rage. Stop immediately, he bellowed. Bailiff, call security, lock the doors, nobody leaves this room. I watched as the bailiffs moved in. I watched as the reality of what they had done crashed down on my parents. They had walked in here to take my life. Now they were about to lose theirs. I sat back in my chair and smoothed my skirt. I looked at Dr. Eris, who was trying to hide under his table. I looked at Vance, who was frantically packing his briefcase. And then I looked at my father. He looked back at me. His eyes were pleading. He mouthed the word please. I just smiled. It was the same smile he gave me when he towed my car. No, Dad, I whispered. No mercy. The courtroom air was thick with the scent of my impending doom. Judge Abernathy held his pen hovered over the order that would strip me of my autonomy. My father Richard was dabbing his eyes with a handkerchief, returning to his seat like a conquering hero who had just saved the village from a monster. My mother was clutching his arm, her face a mask of tragic relief. They thought it was over. They thought they had won. They were already mentally spending my money decorating their new yacht and patting themselves on the back for a job well done. I looked at Silas Thorne. He was not looking at the judge. He was looking at his watch as if he had a lunch reservation he did not want to miss. He stood up. The movement was smooth and predatory like a shark breaking the surface of the water. He did not say objection. He did not ask for permission. He just walked into the center of the well, his Italian leather shoes making a sharp clicking sound on the floor that silenced the room. Your Honor. Silas said, his voice low and bored. Before you sign that document, I believe there is a clerical error we need to address. The judge looked up annoyed. Mr. Thorne, you have had your chance to present evidence. Unless you have a medical counter-evaluation, I am inclined to agree with the petitioner. The facts are plain. Your client is destitute and unstable. The facts are indeed plain. Silas agreed. But I believe the petitioner has been looking at the wrong set of facts. You see, Richard here claims my client lives on handouts. He claims she has no income. He claims she is a financial liability. Is that correct, Richard? My father stood up halfway, his face flushing with indignation. Of course it is correct. I have paid her rent. I have bought her groceries. She has not held a job in 3 years. She is a drain on society. Silas nodded slowly. A drain on society. Interesting choice of words. He walked over to the AV cart in the middle of the room. He plugged in his laptop. The large projection screen behind the judge's bench flickered to life. It was blank white for a moment, blindingly bright. Silas turned to my father. You are under oath, Richard. I want to give you one last chance to amend your statement. Are you absolutely certain that your daughter Lauren has no independent source of income? My father scoffed. He looked at the judge as if asking for help dealing with an idiot. I am certain. She is penniless. If she has any money, it is because she stole it or begged for it. She is incapable of earning a living. Silas smiled. It was the smile of an executioner who enjoyed his work. Thank you for clarifying. He hit a key on his laptop. A document filled the screen. It was not a medical record. It was not a bank statement from my personal checking account showing $20 withdrawals for cat food. It was a United States Department of the Treasury Internal Revenue Service, Form 1040. The courtroom went silent. It was a confused silence at first. Most people hate looking at tax forms. They are boring. They are confusing. But then Silas zoomed in. He zoomed in on the top line showing the filer name, Lauren Vance. Then he scrolled down. He scrolled past the standard deductions. He scrolled past the filing status. He stopped at line 24, total tax. The number was printed in bold black courier font. It was not a small number. It had 2 commas, $4,200,000. That was not my income. That was what I had paid in taxes. Silas let the number hang there. He let it burn into the retinas of everyone in the room. He turned to the jury box, which was empty, but he played to the gallery anyway. Your Honor, Silas said, his voice ringing out like a bell. What you are looking at is the certified tax return for Ms. Lauren Vance for the fiscal year ending December 31st. As you can see, my client did not have zero income. In fact, she had a tax liability of over $4 million. A sound rippled through the courtroom. It started as a murmur and grew into a gasp. It was the sound of reality shattering. The judge took off his glasses. He leaned forward, squinting at the screen. He looked at the number. Then he looked at me. He looked at me in my simple black turtleneck and my scuffed boots. He looked at me sitting alone at the defendant's table. And for the first time, he really saw me. Mr. Thorne, the judge said, his voice hoarse. Are you telling me this is accurate? It is certified by the IRS, Your Honor, Silas said. And if you do the math, assuming a standard effective tax rate for high net worth individuals living in this state, this would imply a gross annual income in the neighborhood of $12 to $15 million. The gasp turned into a roar. My mother, Diane, let out a sound that was half scream, half choke. Her hands flew to her mouth, her eyes bulged. She looked at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. She was trying to process it. She was trying to reconcile the daughter she thought was a failure with the number glowing above the judge's head. $12 million in 1 year. My father had turned the color of old ash. He sat down hard in his chair, his legs giving out. He was shaking his head, muttering, "No, no, that is not right. That is a mistake," over and over again. He looked like a man who had just watched his house burn down. But the best reaction, the one I had been waiting for, came from the gallery. I turned in my chair just enough to see the back row. My brother Brandon was staring at the screen with his mouth open, catching flies. But his wife Keisha was moving. Her hands were flying across her smartphone. She was not looking at me. She was typing furiously. I knew exactly what she was typing. She was searching for the entity listed on the K-1 form attached to the tax return, Phoenix Holdings. Silas saw it too. He walked back to his table and picked up a glass of water, taking a slow, deliberate sip. He waited until the noise died down just enough to be heard. Now, Richard, Silas said, turning back to my father, who looked like he was having a cardiac event. You claimed my client lives on handouts. You claimed she is a financial burden. It appears, however, that she earns more in a month than you earned in your entire legal career. Objection, Vance shouted, jumping up. His face was red and sweaty. This is an ambush. We have never seen these documents. This is irrelevant. The respondent could have won the lottery. That does not mean she is competent. It just means she is lucky. Silas laughed. It was a cold, sharp bark. Lucky. Mr. Vance, Luck does not file quarterly estimated tax payments. Luck does not maintain a diversified portfolio of distressed assets. Luck does not run a private equity firm with a 40% year-over-year return. He hit another key on the laptop. The image changed. This time it was a corporate organizational chart. At the top, in a box shaded gold, was Phoenix Holdings LLC. Below it were dozens of subsidiaries, real estate holding companies, tech incubators, and a debt acquisition firm. And right there at the top, connecting to every single box, was my name. Lauren Vance, sole proprietor, CEO. Silas pointed to the screen. My client is not lucky, Silas said. She is a shark. She is the founder and CEO of Phoenix Holdings. She specializes in buying high-risk debt and turning it into gold. She has been doing this for 5 years right under your noses while you were busy mocking her for fostering cats. I heard a small whimper from the gallery. It was Keisha. She had found it. She was looking at her phone screen with horror. I knew what she was seeing. The Forbes profile I had done under a pseudonym but with my company name. The articles about the mystery investor buying up downtown commercial real estate. The sheer scale of what I owned. She nudged Brandon hard in the ribs. She shoved the phone in his face. He looked at it. He looked at me. His face went from shock to a terrifying realization. He realized he had tried to scam $500 from a woman who could buy and sell him before breakfast. My mother found her voice. It was a shrill screech that hurt my ears. "That is my money," she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She stole it. She must have stolen it. Where else would she get it? She has no job. She sits in that apartment all day. She is a thief, Richard, do something." Judge Abernathy slammed his gavel. "Silence," he roared. "One more outburst. Mrs. Vance and I will have you removed." He turned his gaze to Silas. "Mr. Thorne, explain this. How does a woman who lives in a rental apartment and drives a 10-year-old Honda generate this kind of revenue?" Silas smiled. He walked over to me and placed a hand on my shoulder. It was a gesture of respect, not comfort. "She lives modestly because she is smart." "Your Honor," Silas said. "She knows that wealth attracts parasites. She knows that if she flashed her money around, people would try to take it. People like the petitioners." He gestured to my parents. "They wanted a helpless daughter they could control, so she gave them one. She let them believe the lie because it kept them at bay. But make no mistake, the only thing my client is guilty of is being the smartest person in this room." My father stood up again. He was trembling with rage. "This is a trick," he shouted. "It is a shell game. Phoenix Holdings is a scam. It has to be. She is not capable of this. She is mentally ill. Look at the doctor's report." Silas turned on him. "The doctor's report? You mean the report from Dr. Eris? The one you paid $10,000 for?" Vance jumped up again. "Objection! That is hearsay. That is slander." "I have the bank transfer records," Silas said calmly. "We will get to that in the criminal phase, but right now we are establishing capacity. And I think a woman who built a $50 million empire from a laptop in her kitchen has more capacity than a disbarred lawyer who has to borrow money from loan sharks to pay his country club dues." My father froze. The word disbarred hung in the air. He had kept that secret for years. He told everyone he retired. He told everyone he was consulting. But he had lost his license for commingling client funds. He thought nobody knew. "How do you know that?" he whispered. Silas did not answer. He just pointed to the screen again. He changed the slide. "This document. Your Honor, is a list of assets owned by Phoenix Holdings. It includes 3 commercial skyscrapers in Seattle, a majority stake in a local logistics firm, and a portfolio of private loans." He scrolled down the list. The names of the debtors scrolled by. Companies. Individuals. And then he stopped scrolling. The name at the bottom of the list was highlighted in red. Richard and Diane Vance. The courtroom was so quiet, you could hear the air conditioning humming. My mother was clutching her pearls so hard the string looked like it might snap. My father was staring at the screen as if he was reading his own obituary. Silas turned to the judge. "My client is not just wealthy, Your Honor. She is the petitioner's creditor. She owns the mortgage on their house. She owns the loan on their car. She owns the debt my brother Brandon racked up gambling online. She bought it all." He turned to look at my parents. His voice was soft, almost gentle, but it carried the weight of a falling anvil. "You came here to take her money," Silas said. "You came here to control her. But you forgot one thing. When you owe the bank owns you. And Lauren is the bank." My mother let out a wail that sounded like a wounded animal. She collapsed into her chair, sobbing into her hands. Not fake tears this time. These were real tears of terror. She realized her life was over. She realized the daughter she had slapped and scorned held the deed to her existence. Keisha in the back row stood up abruptly. She grabbed her purse. She tried to push past Brandon to get to the aisle. She wanted to run. She wanted to distance herself from the sinking ship. But the bailiff stepped in front of the door. Nobody was leaving. Not yet. I looked at the judge. He was leaning back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. He looked like a man who had seen everything but was still capable of being surprised. He looked down at me. A small smile played on his lips. "Ms. Vance," the judge said. "Is this true? Do you own your parents' mortgage?" I stood up. I smoothed my skirt. I looked my father in the eye. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. "I bought it 3 days ago. They haven't paid it in 6 months. They are in default. And do you intend to foreclose?" the judge asked. I looked at my mother weeping. I looked at my father trembling. I looked at Brandon and Keisha looking at me with fear. "I intend to protect my assets, Your Honor," I said, just like my father wanted. The judge nodded. He picked up the emergency order my father had filed. He held it up. Then he ripped it in half. "Petition denied," the judge said. "And Mr. Vance, I suggest you sit down. Mr. Thorne looks like he has more slides." Silas grinned. "Oh, I have plenty more, Your Honor. We haven't even gotten to the forgery yet." My father's head snapped up. He looked at Silas. Then he looked at me. The color drained from his face completely, leaving him looking like a corpse. He knew what was coming next. He knew the game was not just lost, it was fatal. Silas clicked the remote. The screen changed again, and the gasp from the courtroom was so loud it sounded like a scream. "Objection, Your Honor!" Mr. Vance shrieked, his voice cracking like a teenage boy. "This is absolute fabrication. These numbers are impossible. I move to strike this entire presentation from the record. It is clearly a sophisticated forgery designed to mislead the court. No unemployed woman living in a rental unit accumulates this kind of wealth without illegal activity. We are looking at money laundering, Your Honor. This proves she is not only incompetent but criminal." Mr. Vance was sweating now. Dark patches were blooming under the arms of his expensive suit. He was pointing a trembling finger at the screen where my tax return still glowed in high definition. He looked like a man trying to hold back the tide with a spoon. Silas did not even turn to look at him. He just tapped the spacebar on his laptop. The screen flickered and changed. "If you believe the tax returns are forged," Silas said, his voice calm and dangerous, "let us look at public property records. These are harder to fake, Mr. Vance, because they are recorded with the county clerk." A map of downtown Seattle appeared on the screen. 3 large pins dropped onto the map. They were located in the financial district, the most expensive square footage in the city. "Defense Exhibit C," Silas announced. 3 Class A commercial buildings, 1 on 4th Avenue, 1 on Pike, and 1 on Madison. Photos of the buildings popped up next to the map. They were gleaming towers of glass and steel. I knew them well. I had bought the first one 4 years ago when the market dipped. I had bought the second one with the profits from the first. And the third one I had acquired last month from a developer who was over-leveraged. "These buildings are owned by a holding company called LH Real Estate," Silas explained. "And if we pull up the articles of incorporation for LH Real Estate, we see a familiar name." He zoomed in on the document. "Member Manager Lauren Vance." The courtroom was dead silent. The only sound was the hum of the projector fan. My mother was staring at the screen, her mouth hanging open in a rictus of shock. She knew these buildings. She shopped in the retail space of the building on Pike. She had probably bought her shoes in a store that paid me rent. 3 buildings, Silas continued. Total assessed value $140 million. And unlike your client, Richard, my client does not believe in mortgages. These properties are owned free and clear. My father made a sound like he had been punched in the gut. He slumped forward, gripping the table for support. "Free and clear," he whispered. He could not comprehend it. He had spent his entire life juggling debt, moving money from one credit card to another, trying to keep up appearances. The idea of owning anything without a bank involved was alien to him. "But we are not done," Silas said relentlessly. He was enjoying this. He was peeling back the layers of my life one by one and flaying my parents with them. He clicked the remote again. A pie chart appeared on the screen. It showed the shareholder structure of a local financial institution, Sound Community Bank. "This bank might sound familiar to the petitioner," Silas said, looking at my father. "It should. It is where you have your checking account, Richard. It is where you have your maxed out line of credit. It is where you go to beg for overdraft protection every month." My father flinched. "My client Silas said," pointing to the largest slice of the pie, "owns 15% of Sound Community Bank. She is the single largest individual shareholder. She sits on the board of directors." Keisha let out a choked gasp. She grabbed Brandon's arm, digging her nails into his suit jacket. "Brandon looks like he was going to be sick. He had applied for a loan at that bank last week. He had been rejected. Now he knew why. I had seen his application. I had seen the lies he put on his income statement. I had personally flagged it for denial." 15%, Silas repeated. "That gives her a controlling interest in many of the bank's decisions, including, I might add, the decision to call in bad debts." He let that threat hang in the air for a moment. He let my father do the math. He let him realize that the institution he relied on to keep his house of cards standing was owned by the daughter he had called a failure. And finally, Silas said, clicking the remote one more time, "Let us address the accusation that my client wastes money on hoarding." A series of photographs appeared on the screen. They were professional, high-resolution images of paintings, modern art, abstract expressionism, sculptures. "Mr. Vance called my client's apartment a dump filled with trash," Silas said. He specifically mocked a leather bag she tried to save. But he failed to look in the climate-controlled storage unit my client maintains at the Seattle Freeport. The photos cycled through. A Basquiat, a Rothko, a towering sculpture by Kusama. This collection, Silas said, has been independently appraised by Christie's at $10 million. My client has an eye for undervalued assets, whether they are distressed companies or overlooked masterpieces. She bought most of these before the artists became household names. She did not inherit this wealth, Richard. She curated it. $10 million in art. My mother let out a low moan. She prided herself on her taste. She bought prints at the mall and framed them in gold leaf to look expensive. She realized now that she had been looking down on a woman who owned the real thing. She realized that the dusty Hermes bag she had tried to throw in the garbage was worth more than her entire wardrobe combined. Silas closed his laptop. The screen went dark, leaving the after-image of my success burning in everyone's eyes. He turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the petitioner claims my client is irresponsible. They claim she needs a conservator to manage a $500,000 inheritance. I submit to the court that my client manages a portfolio that exceeds $200 million. She does so without debt, without scandal, and without help. The idea that Richard Vance, a man with a negative net worth and a history of financial mismanagement, could protect her assets is not just laughable, it is insulting." The judge looked at me. His expression had changed completely. Gone was the pity. Gone was the skepticism. In its place was a look of profound respect and a little bit of fear. "Ms. Vance," the judge said, "you have been very quiet. Do you have anything you want to say to your parents?" I stood up. I did not smooth my skirt this time. I did not look down. I looked straight at the table where my parents sat huddled together like survivors on a life raft. My father looked up at me. His eyes were red. He looked small. He looked like a man who had just realized he had spent his life betting on the wrong horse. "Lauren," he croaked. "Lauren, please." We did not know. I walked around the table. I stood in the open space between us. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. "You did not know," I said, my voice steady and cold, "because you never asked. You never looked. You saw a Honda Civic and you assumed failure. You saw a rental apartment and you assumed poverty. You saw a woman alone and you assumed weakness. I took a step closer. My mother shrank back in her chair, terrified of me. You wanted to be my conservator, Dad, I said. You wanted to manage my money. You wanted to give me an allowance. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Do you even know what a cap rate is, Richard? Do you know how to structure a reverse merger? Do you know the difference between a secured and an unsecured creditor? He stared at me, unable to speak. He shook his head slowly. I did not think so, I said. I leaned in close so he could see the fire in my eyes. So he could see the daughter he had thrown away. You want to protect my assets? I whispered, my voice carrying to the back of the room. You want to save me from myself. Dad, look at me. Look at what I built while you were drowning. Do you really think you have the qualifications to manage a sum of money that is larger than the total amount you have earned in your entire miserable life? He flinched as if I had slapped him. You are an ant trying to lead a lion, I said. You are a bankrupt fraud trying to give financial advice to a tycoon. It would be funny if it was not so pathetic. I straightened up and looked at the judge. Your Honor, I said, my parents are not here to help me. They are here to rob me. They are drowning and they see me as a life jacket. But I am not a life jacket. I am the anchor. And I am done dragging them along. My father put his head in his hands and began to weep. It was the sound of a man who knew he had lost everything. He had lost the money, he had lost the house, and he had lost the daughter he never bothered to know. I turned my back on him. I looked at Silas. I looked at the box of evidence he still had not opened, the box with the forgery. Finish it, I said. Silas nodded. He picked up the remote again. My mother looked up. Her eyes were wide with panic. She knew there was more. She knew the worst was yet to come. She grabbed Mr. Vance's arm. Make it stop, she hissed. Make him stop! Mr. Vance shook her off. He was done. He was packing his bag. He knew a sinking ship when he saw one. Your Honor, Silas said, we have established that my client does not need a conservator. But we have one final matter to address. A matter that goes beyond family court. He held up the plastic bag with the will inside. My parents stopped breathing. They knew what it was. They knew their time was up. I sat back down and watched. I watched them crumble. I watched them break. And for the first time in my life, I felt absolutely nothing for them. No love, no hate. No, just the cold indifference of a stranger watching a building collapse on the news. They were not my parents anymore. They were just bad assets. And I was liquidating them. My father stood there gripping the edge of the witness stand, his knuckles white as bone. He looked like a man who had been stripped naked in the middle of Times Square, but he was not ready to surrender. Not yet. He possessed the desperate tenacity of a drowning man who would climb on top of his own child just to get a breath of air. He cleared his throat, a wet, ragged sound that echoed in the silent courtroom. Your Honor, Richard said, his voice shaking but gaining volume. Even if this is true, even if my daughter has somehow stumbled into money, that does not change the fundamental facts of this petition. In fact, it makes the conservatorship even more urgent. He turned to the judge, his eyes wide and pleading. Look at her, Your Honor. She is a young woman with no husband, no children, and no guidance. Suddenly, she has millions of dollars. Do you know what happens to people like that? They become targets. They get taken advantage of. They make terrible decisions. She needs protection now more than ever. We are her parents. We are the only people in the world who truly care about her well-being, not her wallet. We have a moral obligation to step in. My mother nodded vigorously from her seat, blotting her mascara-stained cheeks. She looked at me with a mixture of fear and hunger. She saw the numbers on the screen and she did not see my success. She saw a buffet and she was starving. Richard pointed a trembling finger at me. Wealth does not equal sanity, he declared. Howard Hughes was a billionaire and he stored his urine in jars. My daughter living in squalor while hoarding millions is proof of her mental decline. She needs a steward, she needs a steady hand. And as her father, I am the only one qualified to provide it. Silas did not interrupt. He let my father dig the hole deeper. He let him stand there and claim moral superiority. He waited until the last echo of my father's voice faded from the room. Then Silas walked back to the banker's box. He reached inside and pulled out a binder. It was thick, black, and ominous. Silas walked to the podium. He placed the binder down with a heavy thud. "You raise an interesting point, Richard," Silas said, his voice conversational, almost friendly. "The court does indeed look for a conservator who is financially stable, responsible, and free of conflicts of interest. The law requires a fiduciary who can act solely in the best interest of the protected person." Silas opened the binder. He flipped through the pages, the sound crisp and sharp. "However, there is a specific statute in this state regarding who is eligible to serve as a conservator. Specifically, an individual cannot be appointed if they have a direct financial conflict with the respondent. For example, you cannot manage the money of a person you owe money to." My father blinked. "I do not owe her money. I have given her everything. I have supported her for years." Silas looked up from the binder. His eyes were hard. "Actually, Richard, you do. And it is not just a little money. It is everything." Silas pulled a document from the binder and held it up. "Your Honor, I would like to introduce Defense Exhibit F. This is a deed of trust reassignment recorded 3 days ago with the county recorder. It concerns the property located at 442 Oakwood Drive, the petitioner's primary residence." My mother let out a small gasp. That was their address. The house where I grew up. The house they were so proud of. Silas continued. "The mortgage on this property was originated by First National. However, due to 4 months of non-payment, the note was classified as distressed. It was packaged into a portfolio of toxic assets and sold on the secondary market. The buyer of that note was a subsidiary of Phoenix Holdings." He turned to my father. "You stopped paying your mortgage in June, Richard. You received a notice of default in August. You buried it in your desk drawer hoping a miracle would happen, hoping you could steal your daughter's inheritance to pay the arrears before the foreclosure started. Well, the miracle happened. The debt was bought. But it was not bought by a stranger. It was bought by your daughter." My father was shaking his head. "No, that is not possible. The bank would never sell it to her." "The bank sells to whoever writes the check," Silas said. "And my client wrote a very big check. But the house is just the beginning." Silas pulled out another document. "This is a title lien for a 2022 Mercedes S-Class sedan registered to Richard Vance. It appears you took out a title loan on this vehicle 6 months ago, a loan with a predatory interest rate of 18%. You have missed the last 3 payments. The lender initiated repossession proceedings last week. My client purchased that debt yesterday. She now holds the title to your car. She could have it towed from the courthouse parking lot right now if she wanted to." I watched my father. He looked like he was going to be sick. He loved that car. It was his symbol of status. It was how he convinced the world he was still a big-shot lawyer. And now he knew that I owned it. But why, Silas asked, rhetorical and sharp. Why would a man who claims to be a successful consultant stop paying his mortgage and his car note? "Where did the money go, Richard?" Silas turned a page in the binder. "We did a forensic accounting of your finances. We found the answer. It wasn't the market. It wasn't bad luck. It was the Golden Dragon, an offshore online gambling site." My mother stood up. "Gambling," she screamed. "Richard, you said you stopped. You swore on your mother's grave." "Sit down, Diane," my father snapped, but his voice had no power. He was shrinking. Silas ignored the outburst. "Over the last 2 years, Richard, you have wire transferred over $300,000 to offshore accounts. You liquidated your 401k. You drained your savings, you maxed out your credit cards, and when that wasn't enough, you took out a second mortgage on the house, a hard money loan with a private lender. Silas held up a sheet of paper. This represents the promissory note for that second mortgage. $200,000. Due in full next month. You have no way to pay it. You are insolvent, Richard. You are technically bankrupt. You came into this courtroom wearing a $3,000 suit, but the truth is, you have a negative net worth of nearly $500,000. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. The only sound was my mother weeping softly into her hands. Keisha was staring at the ceiling as if praying for a teleportation device. Brandon was looking at his shoes, probably realizing that the bank of Dad was not just closed, it was burned to the ground. Silas closed the binder. "Your Honor," he said, addressing the judge, "the petitioner is not here to protect my client. He is here to loot her. He is a desperate man with a gambling addiction who sees his daughter's inheritance as his only way out of financial ruin. He has a massive conflict of interest. He cannot be her conservator because she is his primary creditor. Lauren Vance effectively owns her parents." The judge looked at my father with an expression of pure disgust. "It was the look you give to something you scrape off your shoe," Mr. Vance, the judge said. "Is this true? Are you in default on your mortgage? Do you have outstanding gambling debts?" My father tried to speak. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at me. He looked at the daughter he had called a failure, the daughter he had tried to have committed, and he realized that I was the only thing standing between him and the street. "I needed to manage it," he whispered, finally, his voice broken. "I could have fixed it. I just needed a bridge loan. I was going to pay her back, I swear. Once the investments paid off, I would have paid her back." "Investments?" Silas scoffed. "You mean blackjack. You were going to gamble with her money, Richard. You were going to take her legacy and put it on red." My father slumped forward, his forehead touching the wood of the witness stand. He was sobbing now. It was a pathetic sound, the sound of a narcissist whose mask had been ripped off. I stood up. I walked toward him. The bailiff took a step forward, but I held up a hand. I stopped 3 feet from the witness stand. "You said I was irresponsible, Dad." I said, my voice steady. "You said I needed guidance. But look at us. I built an empire from nothing. You took a lifetime of privilege and set it on fire." He looked up at me, his eyes red and swollen. "Lauren, please. The house. Your mother. We have nowhere to go." "You should have thought about that before you tried to lock me in a basement," I said. "You should have thought about that before you hired a doctor to call me crazy. You bet your life against mine, Dad. And you lost." I turned to the judge. "Your Honor," I said, "I think we have established that my father is not fit to manage a lemonade stand, let alone my estate. But I want to be clear about something. I did not buy their debt to be cruel. I bought it because I knew this day would come. I knew they would come for me, and I wanted to make sure that when they did, I held the whip." The judge nodded slowly. He looked at the binder Silas had placed on his bench. "The petition for conservatorship is denied with prejudice," the judge ruled. "Mr. Vance, you have perpetrated a fraud upon this court. You have filed a frivolous motion in an attempt to secure funds to pay your personal debts. This is an abuse of the legal system." But the judge was not done. He looked at the documents again. "Mr. Thorne," he asked, "this second mortgage, the one for $200,000, who is the co-signer on this note?" Silas smiled. "I was waiting for that." He turned to the gallery. "The co-signer is Brandon Vance." My brother jumped in his seat. "Me," he squeaked. "I never signed anything." Silas picked up a piece of paper. "According to this notarized document, Brandon Vance pledged his future earnings and assets to secure the loan for his father. It appears Richard convinced his son to sign it under the guise of a business investment." Keisha let out a shriek. She hit Brandon on the arm. "You signed what? You told me that was for the crypto business. You told me we were going to be rich." I watched them turn on each other. It was inevitable. Rats always eat each other when the ship goes down. My father had dragged his golden child down with him. He had used Brandon just like he tried to use me. The only difference was Brandon was stupid enough to sign. I own you too, Brandon, I said, looking at my brother. That crypto startup you are running out of your garage. The equipment you bought. It is all collateral, and since you are in default on the loan, I will be sending a team to collect it tomorrow. Brandon looked at me with pure hatred. You can't do that. We are family. Family, I laughed. Family is what you rely on when you are honest. When you try to steal from me, you are not family. You are a bad investment. And Phoenix Holdings always liquidates bad investments. My mother stood up shakily. She walked over to the railing separating the well from the gallery. She looked at me. Lauren, she said, her voice trembling. We are your parents. You cannot evict us. People will talk. Think of the scandal. The scandal, I said. Mom, you just watched your husband admit to gambling away his retirement and trying to frame his daughter. The scandal is already here. And as for evicting you, I have not decided yet. It depends on how quickly you can pack. I turned back to the judge. Your Honor, I believe we are done here regarding the conservatorship. But my lawyer mentioned a criminal matter, the forgery. The judge's face hardened. Yes, the will. My father tried to stand up. I need a recess, he stammered. I need medical attention. I am having chest pains. Sit down, Richard, the judge barked. You are not having a heart attack, you are having a panic attack because you know what comes next. The judge looked at the bailiff. Lock the doors. The heavy wooden doors at the back of the room clanked shut. The sound was final. My family was trapped. They were trapped in the room with the truth, and the truth was about to crush them. I looked at Silas. He nodded. He picked up the remote control for the projector. One last slide, he said. He clicked the button. The screen changed, showing a side-by-side comparison of two signatures. One was the signature on the fake will my father had tried to force me to sign. The other was the signature on the court petition he had filed today. They were identical, down to the microscopic tremor in the letter R, but there was a third signature on the screen. It was from an old birthday card my aunt had sent me years ago. Silas pointed to the screen. The signature on the left is the forgery, Silas said. The signature in the middle is Richard's. The signature on the right is the real Aunt Josephine. As you can see, Your Honor. Richard did not even try very hard. He just signed his own name and tried to make it look loopy. My father put his head on the table and let out a long, low moan. He is done, I thought. He is absolutely done. I looked at my mother. She was not looking at my father. She was looking at me. And in her eyes I saw the realization that she was going to have to find a job. She was going to have to work. For the first time in 40 years, Diane Vance was going to have to earn a living. I almost felt sorry for the manager who would have to hire her. Almost. My father stood up, and he was not the broken man of a moment ago. He was the tyrant I remembered from my childhood. The man who ruled by fear. The man who believed his voice was the only one that mattered. He slammed his fist onto the table hard enough to make the water pitcher jump. I am her father, he screamed. His face contorted into a mask of pure rage. I have rights. You cannot do this to me. I raised her. I fed her. That money belongs to the family. It belongs to me by right of blood. I have the power here. Not her, not this court. Me. He lunged toward me. He did not get far. The bailiff stepped forward, his hand resting on his taser, but Richard did not see him. He only saw me. He saw the object he had owned for 34 years, daring to walk away. You are nothing, he spat. You are ungrateful trash. Without me, you would be living in a gutter. I made you. The courtroom held its breath. It was a display of raw, unfiltered narcissism. It was ugly. It was terrifying. And it was exactly what Silas wanted the judge to see. Silas did not move to protect me. He did not have to. He just slid one final manila envelope across the bench to Judge Abernathy. Your Honor! Silas said, his voice cutting through my father's, shouting like a knife. Before you hold the petitioner in contempt for his outburst, I ask you to review this. It is the forensic report regarding the document Richard Vance submitted as Exhibit A. The will. Judge Abernathy looked at my father, who was still ranting about his parental rights. Then he looked down at the envelope. He opened it. He pulled out a report with high-resolution magnified images of signatures. The judge began to read. As he read, the color drained from his face. It went from flushed to pale to a sickly gray. His hands started to shake. He read the first page, then the second. He looked at the conclusion at the bottom. My father was still yelling. He was shouting about how he was going to sue everyone in the room. He was shouting that he was a victim of a conspiracy. Judge Abernathy stood up. He grabbed his gavel. He did not just tap it. He swung it. He swung it with the force of a man who had just realized he was being used as an accomplice to a crime. The gavel hit the sounding block with a crack that sounded like a gunshot. The handle snapped in two. The head of the gavel flew off and skittered across the bench. "Stop immediately," the judge bellowed. His voice was not just loud, it was thunderous. It shook the walls. My father stopped mid-sentence. His mouth hung open. "Where are the police?" the judge shouted, looking at the bailiff. "Call security. Call them now. Lock the doors. Nobody moves." The energy in the room shifted instantly from civil dispute to crime scene. The bailiff spoke into his radio. "Code red in courtroom 4. I need backup immediately." My mother stood up, her hands trembling. "What is happening?" she asked, her voice high and thin. "Richard, what is happening?" Judge Abernathy looked down at them. He held up the report Silas had given him. "Mr. Vance," the judge said, his voice shaking with suppressed fury. "You came into my courtroom. You swore an oath on the Bible. You presented a document to this court as the last will and testament of Josephine Vance." "Yes," my father stammered. "Yes, it is her will. She signed it." "I was there." "You are a liar," the judge said. "And not just a liar. You are a forger." He threw the report down on the bench. "This forensic analysis is conclusive. The ink used to sign that document was manufactured 2 years after your aunt died. The paper stock contains fibers that did not exist when this document was supposedly drafted. And the signature." The judge pointed a shaking finger at the screen where Silas had projected the comparison. "The signature is a trace, a clumsy trace. The forensic document examiner found indentations on the paper matching your own handwriting, Richard. You placed a light box under the paper and you traced her name. And you did not even do a good job." My father grabbed the table for support. "That is not true. That is a lie. That expert is paid off." The judge ignored him. He picked up another document from the envelope. "But that is not the worst part, Mr. Vance. The worst part is what you were trying to hide. Mr. Thorne has provided the court with a certified copy of the actual will. The one filed with the county clerk in the jurisdiction where your aunt died. The one you tried to suppress." The judge looked at me. His eyes were filled with a mixture of horror and apology. "Ms. Vance," he said softly, "your father told you the inheritance was $500,000. He told this court the same thing. He claimed he needed to manage that sum for your protection. He held up the real will. The actual bequest from Josephine Vance to her niece Lauren Vance is not $500,000. It is the entirety of her estate, including her investment portfolio, her property holdings, and her life insurance. The total value of the estate is $5 million. $5 million. The number hung in the air. My mother let out a sound that was not human. It was a gasp that turned into a retch. She grabbed Richard's arm and dug her nails in. "$5 million, she hissed. "You told me it was 500,000. You told me we were fighting for scraps." Richard looked at her, his eyes wild. "I had to," he whispered. "If you knew how much it was, you would have spent it all. I needed to control it. I needed to pay the debts." You stole from me, my mother screamed. You lied to me. The doors to the courtroom burst open. 4 sheriff's deputies marched in, their hands on their belts. They looked at the judge. Your Honor, the lead deputy asked. Take them into custody, the judge ordered, pointing at my parents. Both of them. My father tried to back away. No, wait. This is a misunderstanding. I am an attorney. You cannot arrest me. You are a criminal, the judge snapped. You are under arrest for fraud, forgery, uttering a false instrument, and perjury. And since you filed this petition under oath, you are also charged with filing a false police report and abuse of process. The deputies moved fast. They grabbed my father's arms and twisted them behind his back. The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut was the loudest thing I had ever heard. Ow, you are hurting me, my father whined. I have a bad shoulder. My mother tried to run. She actually tried to make a break for the side door, but she was in heels and she was shaking too hard. A female deputy caught her by the arm. Do not touch me, my mother shrieked. I did not do anything. It was him. It was all him. He made me do it. He told me she was crazy. He told me the will was real. The judge looked at her. Mrs. Vance, you signed an affidavit supporting his petition. You sat in that chair and lied to my face about your daughter's mental state. You claimed you witnessed her reckless spending. You are an accomplice. Cuff her. They cuffed my mother. She was sobbing now, mascara running down her face, ruining her expensive foundation. She looked at me. Lauren, tell them, she begged. Tell them I did not know. Tell them I am your mother. You cannot let them take me to jail. I stood there and looked at her. I looked at the woman who had criticized my weight, my hair, my clothes, my life since the day I was born. I looked at the woman who had slapped me at a funeral. I looked at the woman who was willing to lock me in a basement to get her hands on money she did not earn. And I saw the truth. She did know. Maybe she did not know it was 5 million, but she knew it was a lie. She knew the conservatorship was a sham. She knew I was sane, and she went along with it because she wanted the money. I did not say a word. I just watched. The deputies began to drag them out. My father was limp, his legs dragging on the floor. He was muttering to himself, 5 million. I could have fixed everything. I could have won it back. My mother was screaming my name. Lauren! Lauren, please! We are family! Brandon and Keisha were pressed against the back wall, trying to blend into the paint. The deputies stopped in front of them. Are you Brandon Vance? The deputy asked. Brandon nodded, his eyes wide with terror. We have a warrant for your arrest as well, the deputy said. Bench warrant for unpaid gambling debts, and we have probable cause to believe you conspired in this fraud. Turn around. No, Keisha screamed. No, he did not do anything. He just signed some papers. He is stupid. He did not know what he was signing. Ignorance is not a defense, the deputy said, spinning Brandon around and cuffing him. Keisha stood alone. She looked at her husband being arrested. She looked at her in-laws being dragged away. She looked at me. I pulled out my phone. I typed a quick message to my assistant. Foreclose on the house, repossess the car, and cancel the lease on the apartment. Effective immediately. Keisha saw me typing. She knew what I was doing. Lauren, she said, her voice trembling. Where am I supposed to go? They took the boat deposit. We have no money. You own our house. I looked at her. I looked at the diamond bracelet on her wrist. Sell the bracelet, Keisha, I said. It should cover a few nights at a motel. And after that, I suggest you get a job. I hear the grocery store is hiring baggers. The deputies marched my family out the side door. The heavy metal door slammed shut behind them, cutting off my mother's screams. The courtroom was silent again. The judge sat back down. He picked up the broken handle of his gavel and looked at it. He shook his head. Ms. Vance, the judge, said, his voice quiet. I want to apologize to you. The court system is designed to protect people. In this case, it almost failed. If you had not been who you are, if you had not had the resources to fight this, he trailed off. We both knew what would have happened. I would be in a facility right now drugged and silenced while they drained my accounts. You do not have to apologize, Your Honor, I said. You did your job, and now I am going to do mine. The judge nodded. He signed an order. Case dismissed with prejudice, the judge said. All assets are to be released to the respondent immediately. The restraining order is granted, permanent, and I am referring this entire transcript to the district attorney for enhanced prosecution. Thank you, Your Honor, Silas said, closing his briefcase. We walked out of the courtroom. The hallway was empty. The air felt cleaner out here. Silas looked at me. You okay? I took a deep breath. I filled my lungs with the air of a free woman. A woman worth millions. A woman who owed nothing to anyone. I am fine, Silas, I said. I am better than fine. I walked to the elevator. I had a meeting with an architect in an hour. I was going to redesign the lobby of my newest building, and then I was going to go home to my penthouse, feed my cats, and sleep for 12 hours. My family was gone. They were in a holding cell processing. They were fingerprinting. They were calling bail bondsmen who would not take their calls because they had no collateral. They were finally exactly where they belonged. And I was finally exactly where I belonged, at the top. The heavy oak doors of the courtroom swung shut behind me, cutting off the sound of my mother's weeping. The hallway was cool and quiet, a stark contrast to the humidity of the courtroom where my family had just immolated themselves. I walked toward the elevators, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the polished marble floor. Silas walked beside me, his briefcase swinging in time with his stride. He did not say a word. He knew better than to interrupt a moment like this. I felt a strange lightness in my chest, as if gravity had released its hold on me. For the first time in 34 years, I was not heavy with the weight of their expectations or their failures. But the silence did not last. Behind us, the side doors of the courtroom burst open. I heard the frantic slap of running footsteps against the stone floor. It was a desperate, uncoordinated sound. I did not need to turn around to know who it was. The rats were fleeing the sinking ship, and they had realized I was the only lifeboat left in the ocean. Lauren, wait. It was Brandon. His voice cracked, echoing down the long corridor. He sounded like he was 12 years old again, begging for me to take the blame for a broken window. Lauren, please stop. I kept walking. I pressed the call button for the elevator. The light turned red. I stared at the numbers counting down, refusing to acknowledge the chaos rushing toward me. They caught up to us just as the elevator dinged. Brandon was out of breath, his tie askew, his face slick with sweat. Keisha was right behind him. She had lost her composure entirely. Her expensive makeup was streaked, and she was clutching her purse like it contained the last oxygen on Earth. They blocked the elevator door, preventing it from closing. Lauren, you cannot just walk away, Brandon panted. He tried to grab my arm, but Silas stepped in between us. It was a subtle movement, but it was a wall of ice. Brandon flinched back. Lauren, look at what is happening, he pleaded, gesturing back toward the courtroom. They are taking Mom and Dad away. They are putting them in handcuffs. They are talking about federal charges. You did this. You have to stop it. I looked at him. I looked at the brother who had mocked my clothes at a funeral. The brother who had tried to scam me out of $500 while I was grieving. I did not do this, Brandon, I said, my voice flat. They committed fraud. They forged a will. They lied under oath. I simply turned on the lights. But we did not know, Keisha interrupted, her voice shrill and trembling. She pushed past Brandon, trying to get into my line of sight. We did not know about the forgery, Lauren. We swear. Your dad told us everything was legal. He said the conservatorship was standard procedure. We are victims here too. We lost the deposit on the boat. We have debts. If you foreclose on the house, where are we supposed to go? I looked at her wrist. The diamond bracelet was still there, glinting under the fluorescent lights. It was a bracelet bought with credit card debt that I now owned. You are not victims, I said. You are accomplices. You were happy to watch me be committed to a mental institution as long as you got your cut. You were measuring the curtains in my apartment while you thought I was being locked away. Do not talk to me about being a victim, Keisha. You played the game. You lost. The elevator doors tried to close again, bumping against Brandon's shoulder. He shoved them back open. Desperation was making him bold. We are blood, Lauren, he shouted. We are your family. Does that mean nothing to you? You have millions. You have buildings. You have an empire. All we need is a little help. Just call off the dogs. Tell the lawyers to drop the foreclosure. Give us a loan. Anything. If you leave us like this, we are ruined. I will go to jail for the gambling debt. Keisha will leave me. My life is over. He was crying now, real ugly tears. It was the first time I had ever seen him cry for something other than not getting his way. But even now it was selfish. He was not crying for our parents. He was not crying for the relationship we never had. He was crying for himself. I looked at Silas. I gave him a small nod. He stepped back, allowing me to face them without a barrier. I stepped forward. I looked Brandon in the eye. You want help? I asked. His face lit up. It was pathetic how quickly the hope returned. Yes, Lauren, yes. Please. Just something to get us through. We will pay you back. I swear. I reached into my purse. Brandon watched my hand, his eyes hungry. He probably thought I was reaching for a checkbook. He probably thought I was going to write him a check for $1 million and tell him all was forgiven. Because that is what the old Lauren would have done. The Lauren who wanted to be loved. But I did not pull out a checkbook. I pulled out a set of keys. They were simple silver keys on a plain metal ring. You said you wanted my assets, I said, holding the keys up. You said you wanted my apartment. You spent all day yesterday talking about how perfect it would be for your office. How you were going to paint over my life. I dropped the keys into his hand. He caught them reflexively, looking down at them in confusion. Congratulations, Brandon, I said. You got your wish. I am giving you the apartment. Keisha gasped. Her hands flew to her mouth. You mean it? You are giving us the lease. I am giving you the keys I corrected. It is all yours. The furniture I left behind, the memories, the space. You can move in tonight. You have nowhere else to go anyway since I am seizing your house tomorrow morning. Brandon looked at the keys like they were gold. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you. I knew you would not abandon us. This is a start. We can work with this. I pressed the button for the lobby. The doors began to slide shut. I waited until they were almost closed, until I was just a sliver of a face in the gap. Oh, and Brandon, I said, my voice soft and cold. One more thing. I did not pay the rent for this month. It was due yesterday. The landlord is very strict about late payments. He usually starts the eviction process on the 5th. I hope you have better luck with him than you did with me. I saw the realization hit his face. I saw the hope die. The rent, Keisha shrieked. How much is the rent? $3,000, I said just before the doors sealed. And he takes cash only. Good luck. The doors clicked shut, cutting off their screams. The elevator began to descend. I leaned back against the mirrored wall and closed my eyes. The silence was beautiful. It was the sound of a cord being cut. When the elevator opened into the lobby, the air was different. It was cleaner. I walked out the glass doors and into the bright afternoon sunlight. The city noise washed over me, honking horns and distant sirens, and the hum of life moving forward. At the curb, a car was waiting. It was not a taxi. It was my car. A phantom black Rolls-Royce with tinted windows that turned the world into a shadow. My driver stood by the rear door holding it open. He did not look at my old clothes or my tired face. He looked at me with the respect due to the woman who signed his paycheck. I slid into the back seat. The leather was soft and smelled of expensive conditioner. The door closed with a solid, reassuring thud, shutting out the world. I was in a cocoon of silence and luxury. Brandon and Keisha burst out of the courthouse doors. They stood on the sidewalk scanning the street. They looked frantic. They looked lost. They spotted the Rolls-Royce. Their eyes widened. They started to run toward the car, waving their arms, shouting my name. I looked at the driver in the rearview mirror. "Drive," I said. The engine purred to life. A deep, powerful rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. The car pulled away from the curb, gliding into traffic like a ship launching into the sea. I watched them through the tinted glass. Brandon was running alongside the car for a moment, his hand reaching out as if he could grab the door handle and pull himself back into relevance. Keisha was standing on the curb, crying, clutching the keys to an apartment she could not afford. They grew smaller and smaller as we accelerated. Then we turned a corner, and they were gone. I sat back and exhaled. It was over. I pulled my phone from my bag. I had one last call to make. One last piece of business to conclude before I started my new life. I dialed the number for my head of real estate. He answered on the first ring. "Ms. Vance, how did the hearing go?" "It went exactly as planned," I said. "We have clear title to everything." "Excellent. What are your instructions regarding the residential property on Oakwood Drive?" "The parents' house. Do you want to list it for sale?" "The market is hot. We could flip it for a profit." I looked out the window at the skyline of the city I owned a piece of. I thought about the house. I thought about the dining room where my father lectured me about responsibility. I thought about the living room where my mother told me I was a disappointment. I thought about the basement where they wanted to bury me. "No," I said. "Do not sell it. I have a specific use for it." There was a pause. "What use, Miss Vance?" "It is a suburban home. It is not zoned for commercial." "I want you to donate it," I said. "Donate it? To whom?" "To the city," I said, "but with a deed restriction. A very specific covenant that runs with the land forever. I want it converted into a residential rehabilitation center. A rehab center. For drugs." "No," I said, a smile touching my lips. "For gambling addiction. I want it to be a free clinic for people who have lost everything betting on things they could not afford." I could hear the smile in my assistant's voice. "Understood, Ms. Vance. That is very poetic. Do you have a name in mind for the center?" "Yes," I said. "Name it the Richard Vance Center for Recovery. Put his name on the sign, in big gold letters. Make sure it is lit up at night. I want everyone to see it. I will have the paperwork drawn up immediately." "Anything else?" "No," I said. "That is all." I hung up the phone. The car merged onto the highway, speeding toward the airport. I was not going back to my penthouse. Not yet. My private jet was fueled and waiting. I had a meeting in Tokyo in 14 hours. I had a business to run. I had an empire to build. I looked down at my hands. They were steady. For the first time in my life, they were completely steady. I was not Lauren the daughter. I was not Lauren the sister. I was Lauren Vance, CEO. And I had work to do. The car sped forward, leaving the courthouse, the basement, and the family far behind in the dust. I did not look back. There was nothing there worth seeing. Here is the lesson learned from the story, followed by a call to action written in English suitable for your audience. The most profound lesson from Lauren's journey is that biology is not a binding contract for abuse. We are often conditioned by society to believe that we owe our family unconditional loyalty, access, and forgiveness simply because we share DNA. However, this story illustrates a brutal truth. Toxic family members do not change. They only change their tactics when they need something from you. Lauren's parents did not love her. They viewed her merely as an asset to be liquidated or a problem to be managed. Furthermore, this story teaches us the immense power of moving in silence. Lauren didn't waste her energy arguing with people who were committed to misunderstanding her. Instead, she built an empire in the shadows. She proved that the ultimate defense against gaslighting is not a louder voice but irrefutable evidence. She protected herself not just with money, but with documentation, legal foresight, and unshakable boundaries. Finally, we learn that you cannot save people who are determined to destroy you. Lauren tried to be the dutiful daughter, but her parents interpreted her silence as weakness. Her victory wasn't just about revealing her millions, it was about reclaiming her agency. She showed us that true freedom comes when you stop seeking validation from those incapable of giving it. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is burn the bridge to keep the monsters from following you. If you have ever had to cut off a toxic family member to save your own peace, hit that like button and tell me your story in the comments below. Let's remind each other that we are not alone.